So in this next hour, we're going to all sort of be discussing together an issue that I find extremely relevant and extremely sort of newsworthy, something that I see a lot. And I really remember fondly this discussion participation last year as a fellow. We had two really incredible discussions led by Kayla. And as I was thinking, I was like, wow, I have really big shoes to fill. I had such an interesting discussion. And something that I had been thinking about a lot was technology. I mean, I have this little computer in my pocket all the time, and I hear the news, like privacy scandal this, privacy scandal that, and like these big tech giants, and how one of the really main responses to like the monopoly of these large tech giants and their influence in our lives has been, why don't you just boycott them? And so I was like, that's like an interesting thing, and something really dorky that you want to know about me is that I love NPR, like listen to it every single morning. And I was listening to this NPR segment, a weekend edition segment back in February, and it really caught my attention, so we're all going to listen to it. And it's about a woman who tried to quit. She's a journalist, so for her journalistic preferences, decided to try and quit the big, the largest 5 tech companies in the U.S. For a week. And the slide that I'll show while this is playing is the items that she used while on her week hiatus. Let's take a listen.
Facebook and Google and Amazon have become tech giants because they've made a science of being a part of everything we do, from shopping to taking care of our kids to connecting with friends and relatives. Despite the scandals and concerns about their practices, modern life is seemingly impossible without them. Or is it? Kashmir Hill is a reporter for Gizmodo. She tried to cut Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Apple out of her life, and she joins us now to explain her experiment. Welcome.
Thank you.
I gotta ask you, first of all, how did this idea come up?
It was inspired partly by, when people are criticizing these companies or complaining about how powerful they are, how privacy invasive they are, people will say, well, if you don't like the company, then just stop using their products. And so I wanted to find out if that was possible.
Right.
And spoiler, it's not possible.
It's not possible, right, okay. So you took us to the end, but I want to hear about the process, because I think that can be instructive to us all. You wanted to completely remove one tech giant from your life each week. It's sort of like cutting down your alcohol intake. So tell me how you got started.
Right, in part I thought it would be too hard to go cold turkey, so I wanted to do it step by step. And I also wanted to go beyond just boycotting their products. I really wanted to completely stop all my data, all of my attention, any of my money from going to the tech giants. So I consulted a technologist named Dhruv Mehrotra, and he did a little research and came back to me and said, you know what, I can build a network tool for you, a virtual private network, or VPN, and you can connect all your devices to it, send all your network traffic through it, and I will block a tech giant each week or all of them together, and I'll keep your devices from being able to communicate with their servers.
So tell me about Amazon, because that seems like it's going to be really hard to take out of your life.
Yeah, when I started pulling stats about Amazon, I was shocked that they control 50% of online commerce in the US. That seems like so much. The crazier thing is that's not their most profitable business. Their most profitable business is AWS, or Amazon Web Services. They host websites, they host apps, and so by blocking Amazon and blocking AWS, I just took out a vast amount of the internet. And so basically all digital entertainment was wiped out for me. But this raises real questions about just like how much data Amazon is gathering from the fact that it just controls the infrastructure of commerce and internet activity.
The last week of the experiment, you tried blocking all 5 companies at the same time. God bless you. So how did that go?
So the hardest thing about blocking all the tech giants that last week was getting a phone. Google and Apple have a duopoly on the smartphone market. And so when I went out trying to find a smartphone that was not, made or touched by either tech giant, it wasn't possible.
So what did you do? You just didn't have a cell phone?
Oh, I had a cell phone. I had a dumb phone. I had a Nokia 3310, little tiny bright orange brick with T9 texting. It just had like the number buttons, and all it basically did was calling, texting, and it had the snake game.
You went back to the 90s.
I went back to the 90s. This experiment was a time machine.
So now that you've sort of come out of this, what did you learn? And did it have any lasting impact on your relationship with these companies? And what can we take away?
I mean, the big thing I learned is that it's not possible to navigate the modern world without coming into contact with these companies. They are unavoidable. It made me certainly sympathetic to some of the critics who are saying that these companies are too dominant in their spaces. When I went off of Facebook's products, because Facebook bought Instagram, it controls everywhere where my friends are. And so by rejecting Facebook, I had to reject a lot of people in my life, and it was very hard to stay in contact with them. But there were certainly benefits to rejecting the tech giants, because it forced me to reject technology completely in many cases. Like, I couldn't watch TV because we don't have cable, and internet TV didn't work, and I think that was really good for me. I got out of some bad tech habits, and I'm just kind of looking at screens less. So if nothing else, I'm glad I did this experiment in terms of becoming kind of a healthier tech user.
Kashmir Hill is a reporter for Gizmodo. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And OneNote, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft are financial sponsors of NPR.
So I thought that this little segment, I was like, wow, that's so cool and that's so interesting. And maybe her experiences were not necessarily representative of everyone's experiences or how everyone interfaces with technology, depending on your products and preferences. But it really got me thinking. So this is this headline that I saw in February: why we can't break up with big tech. And then I had also been thinking and reading, I'm kind of a news junkie, and I saw this in the New York Times, this digital gap between wealthier students and poorer students, with wealthier students spending less time in front of screens, where lower funded school districts have been investing a ton in screens. They want computers, and they want this digital and technological education for their students, and in a lot of ways it's unavoidable. These schools that are lower income use technology to provide more educational services and opportunities than for wealthier students who can get them in person rather than over the web. So I was like, that's pretty interesting. Then I came across this lovely headline in Business Insider, that the Silicon Valley people who a lot of ways made their money, are wealthy because of technology, are raising their children without technology. And it really got me thinking about digital freedom and how, if we can define digital freedom, and if there are benefits to going screen-free. So every time we see a blue slide, that's going to be for discussion. So I would love to start just kicking it off and hearing what you guys think about either the podcast or this concept of digital freedom and benefits to going screen-free. You don't have to raise your hand, by the way, just open discussion.
Hi. I'd like to make the argument that I don't think that there are benefits to going screen-free. So I went to a lower income high school and elementary school and preschool. And I grew up in a situation where we were given technology to try and babysit us and to try and fill up class time and give us access to things that we otherwise wouldn't. But it was really dependent upon our individual capacity to engage fully with that technology in order to actually take advantage of it. So a lot of my peers still didn't know how to use Excel by the time they were graduating high school, but because my parents basically said, hey, we don't know how to do calculus. If you need help with your homework, you need to figure it out yourself, and we don't have the money for a tutor, so you need to look online and find the answer. To me, I had to go on screen to try and make something of my life. And I wonder, do you guys think there's a difference between the class interactions of whether there are benefits or not?
Yeah, go for it.
I think maybe there's a difference between having access to the screens after school and maybe in class, because maybe that's something that changes a lot. Students are more likely probably to listen if they don't have a screen in front of them. And then I know that in my school, they gave iPads to all the 6th graders to see how it would interact and they use it in class. And after a year, they realized that the students were, like, they monitor with, like, they told the parents and the students that they were monitoring, but the students forgot. And they looked at what the students were doing in class, and most of the time it was playing games. And so now they instruct like a blocking software, so it blocks everything except like certain websites that are academically vetted, and students can request access, and almost immediately, if the website is vetted by their algorithm, they get access to it. But it's like, it was like an interesting way of seeing that like it's a great way for students if they want to learn and out of class, like great resources, but also not having the total freedom in a way as digital freedom to do whatever they wanted.
I know, like, personally, like, this might be an overshare, but, like, sometimes I have my phone in class, and it'll buzz. I'm sure Kathy's smiling, because I'm sure you have students that have...
I have a screen-free class.
Yeah, but I'm sure, like, in your class, like, a student might, like, look down, like, they get a buzz, they get distracted, right? Like, my screen, like, it makes... Even though obviously we're all very privileged to be at a school like Wellesley, like it does like distract me in some ways, and I don't have those blockers. Like I'm an adult, but it's hard to like regulate. It sometimes feels like a loss of free will. You know, you're like, buzz, that's me. Like I have to go.
Well, what about like phantom vibrations? Like that's a thing that a lot of people get. Like if you are basically addicted to your phone and it's in your pocket all the time, and especially businessy people because they get alerts so often, your anxiety will get to the point where your brain starts hallucinating vibrations, thinking that you have a notification when you don't. And it's like, that just makes me think like our brains are seriously adapting to this level of technological intrusion. So yeah, maybe when it comes to, if you have the capacity to avoid them, there might be benefits. I just don't know what they are.
Oh, there are some health benefits. Because if you look at your screen too much, the melatonin or something decreases. So that's why they advise you to go like 3 to 4 hours before bed, not looking at your screen. And that is impossible for students. So,
Yeah.
Also, I was talking to I don't know what it's called in English, but the eye doctors,
Ophthalmologist.
and they were saying that they were having more and more cases of, and I have this too, which is really bad, is where when you see your one eye, you're
Myopia.
the eye myopia,
Myopia.
and the other one you're down the top, the other one.
I forgot the other one.
So one you can see from far and one you can only see from close, and so you have to have 2 different lenses on your glasses or on your contacts because of the screens, because you're looking up and down and kind of like seeing all the way. So now there are more and more young people with that kind of case of like eye situation going on. So that's also like a health disbenefits in away from screens.
Anyone have any reactions to the podcast? Like, I know we haven't really touched on it, but yeah.
I don't really have like a thought, but I thought it was really interesting when she was talking about like how she felt like out of touch with their friends because they're all on social media and like a large chunk of their lives on social media, which I find really funny because most of my friends at Wellesley actually like hate social media and a lot of them choose to delete their accounts, but after a while they choose to download them back for a couple of months and then they delete them again. And I just think it's really interesting how people would like try to get off social media, but then they feel like, oh, I'm out of touch with people. But so they will be on social media while hating it. And then there's another aspect of the social media that like a lot of people tend to create like an always positive, happy lifestyle on Instagram and not show the vulnerable side or like downside on social media. And I feel like that also like it's very interesting because you would tend to like picture other people's lives as they show on social media while it's not the case, while you would like try to do the same. Yeah.
There's studies that show that when people scroll through like say Facebook or Twitter or something, it literally sets off like the dopamine receptors and a lot of the other pleasure receptors that we have in our brain, and acts in a similar way that a lot of other addictive substances would, like drugs for example. And so I think that the idea of digital freedom, I think the way that Celine interpreted it is like being able to have the freedom to look at whatever you want online, so the idea of like censorship that Mandy was talking about. But the way that I would see digital freedom is more of like being able to actually get away from the screen if you wanted to. And I think that the way that society functions now, or at least in the United States, it's virtually impossible. Like unless you want to remove yourself completely from society and like live in a cabin and be like a subsistence farmer or something, which you can do, so it's possible. But I think if you want to engage with society in some way, it's nearly impossible to do it without being on the internet somehow.
I think there is though a benefit to removing yourself for like short periods of time. Like since the age of 12, I've been going to camp where for 3 years there's not a single screen. So there's no television, there's no phone, iPads, computers. Like even the staff members don't have it. Like you won't see anything. And like debatably that's dangerous because we're in the mountains and probably an adult should have their phone. They don't want any students to see a phone. And I remember when I was 13, there were some people that kept texting without a phone in their hand. And it was just like very stressful. But then after like the first week of everyone getting rid of all their like need for phone, there was a lot of more communication between us. And since we had nothing else to do, like we couldn't text our friends back home or anything, it forced us to like all talk together. And I think that in a way, like going screen free for a little while, even like just for like an afternoon or when you're going to lunch with someone, it can really help to like have a conversation that's not being interrupted by all your other life duties.
I agree. Would we?
Am I allowed to talk?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not part of this, but I just feel the need to.
Well, now you are.
Yeah. She's our amazing videographer. You guys know, literally amazing.
So, I actually, a few days ago, I just discovered that, you know the screen time on the Apple phone?
Well, that's
I just discovered that even though you can like activate it to like block some of your social media apps, it still gives you the option of like ignoring the blocking, which basically makes it useless. So I personally don't think that there is digital freedom. I think that, and I think it has a lot to do with capitalism, because definitely the companies that are producing these apps, these devices, are still working on the motive of profit. So they're I feel like they're disguising it to influence the public to think that they care, in quotes, they care about the public and our health benefits, our health, the health implications of this. But I think that underlying it is still that drive to push that we still use these social media. And so I feel the threat. But yeah, I don't think there's digital.
That's sort of like what
right
your
now.
presentation was about too. Sandra, would you like to go?
Isn't this more about free will, like Chloe's presentation about whether or not people who are addicted to something have the free will to stop it, or whether or not it's like an illness? So I think that the thing we should be talking about that is about whether or not we have the free will to stop it or to limit ourselves. I think that we've become so addicted to it that we don't limit ourselves and we just reach for it. And so I think that if parents are raising their children with iPads instead of like taking care of them or like taking them outside, then that's the problem that we are creating ourselves. Like the tech companies, though they make it flashy so that we want to reach for it, they're not forcing us to do it. So I think that we should be talking about how we could increase our own free will and our ability to choose for ourselves.
But I think in response to that, touching on the thing that Anna just said about how it sets off these chemical like reactions in our brains and in our biology, that even though we like to think that we have free will about a lot of this stuff, I feel like there's almost like a tipping point. Like with alcohol addiction, there's a tipping point where you're either drinking socially or drinking healthily, and when it's a problem. And with social media, I feel like there's the same thing. Confession time. YouTube, I didn't know this, has this thing where they, if they think you're watching a concerning amount of YouTube, they'll pop up a notification saying, yeah, would you like to start digesting your notifications instead of giving you individual ones? And would you like to start getting alerts of how much time that you spent watching YouTube? Wow. And when I first got that, I was a bit big concern, because I tend to play it in the background of a lot of stuff. So it'll be playing while I'm doing my homework, when I'm not even giving it my attention. I didn't realize how much of a presence it had on my life until it tells me that like 4 to 5 hour to 6 hour average watch time, depending on what I'm doing that month.
Rookie numbers.
Yeah. I may be understating them a bit for my pride's sake, but so part of the thing that I wonder about that is like when I want to go to sleep, I end up watching YouTube videos of relaxing sounds and relaxing scenes to get me to go to sleep. My brain has become dependent on that to a large degree. I tried a couple of nights ago to not use it because my phone was dying. I couldn't get to sleep. So at what point do I lose the capacity for free will just because my biology has become associated with something?
And I would also like to add another question that we've all sort of been dancing around. Like, would we characterize our usages like to our phones as like addictions? Like, do you guys feel addicted? Anyone in the room feel addicted to their phone or not addicted to their phone? Like, Chloe.
I think that like we like to characterize addiction as like things that require a substance, like alcoholism or like an opioid addiction or something like that. But really, anything has the ability to become an addiction if it's like changing the way that our brain thinks. Think My Strange Addiction. Ooh, weird stuff, right? Stuff like pornography, like sugar, like our phones. They can't.
Drywall.
Huh?
Yeah. There was a lady who's addicted to eating drywall.
Okay, that's weird. Yeah,
That's one.
There is a point like where we engage in a behavior so often that it changes the way that our brain responds to that behavior, right? And so our phones, and you were Anna, you were saying about the dopamine. Companies do create their websites so that you get that rush of dopamine. They are trying to make them addictive. Like, they want you to be on their site. And so the question is this an addiction? It absolutely is. And there are companies, I don't have an iPhone, so like I'll be that person. But like I have a Google phone, and with the like same idea as screen time, they have the digital well-being app, which doesn't allow you to just like ignore the thing and continue. Like it locks it for the day. And even if you go into the like digital well-being and you say, no, I want more time, and they're like, no, you said for today that you were only gonna do 20 minutes on this app and it is over. So I think like, trust me, I've tried. But I think that, yes, there are companies that like really want you to be addicted because capitalism wants you to spend more time, more money, they can put more ads, they can make more money off of your addiction. And there's like, that's a whole other topic, but like, is it an addiction? Yeah. But does technology also help us to overcome that? And is there a way to interact with it that is kind of in moderation? Absolutely. I don't think there's necessarily any benefit to being able to go like completely screen free, like just to say, I'm done with screens forever, But there is like a benefit to being able to moderate your time with screen.
Yeah.
I'd also like to question, like, are we addicted to our phones or what our phones allow us to do? Because, like, for example, social media, like, you can use it, like, not on your phone. So are you really addicted to the phone itself, or are you really, like, addicted to the adaptability of the phone? Because, like, personally, I use my phone for mail. Like, that's my whole usage of my phone, basically, is emails. And, like, my parents are constantly telling me I could do that on a computer. And I'm not obsessed with my phone. I'm addicted to multitasking and finishing all I have to do and replying to emails. But it doesn't have anything to do with like the structure of my phone. So like that's also something else. It's like, are you addicted to your phone or what it allows you to do?
I don't think it's the structure or though, because if you're comparing a phone to a computer, the difference is like you can say size or maybe the web pages look a little bit different, but they at this point do similar things. And so I think it would be difficult to say that it's like the structure of like the phone and the size of it that makes the addiction. It's more like the dings that you get when you click, when someone sends you a message, or like when you click on an app, it like has music and like these bright lights and your brain is like, ah, like I think it's more so that than like having this thing that you can like really easily move everywhere. But I think that people are, or at least me personally, I am more addicted to my phone than say like my computer, only because it's easier to open, and like a computer takes time to boot up and you have to like, but so I think that there maybe is something about a phone and the portability aspect that makes it a little bit more addicting than say a computer. But I think it's more so the content of it rather than the structure that causes the addiction.
Zach, and then Chloe?
So I feel like part of the problem with the addiction is whereas like with substance abuse and stuff, it's more, I guess I would say more physical than it is with things like this. So whereas like with opioids or something like that, like you can see tangible sort of evidence of an addiction. With this, while there is like the dopamine and stuff like that, the addiction is almost a little more based on what's socially normal. And because all of it is now so socially normal, whereas maybe like 5 or 10 years ago, what we'd classify, or like then we might have classified how we just use phones and technology normally now as like excessive and addiction. But now, because it's just so normalized, like, are we going to say that 80 or 90 or 100% of a certain population is addicted to technology? Like, it could be true, but like, it's just a difficult sort of thing to figure out where do we draw that line now.
Yeah, I have a question to just wondering what you think. Like, I think my phone or just like email and a lot of the other things are so integrated into our professional aspects of our lives that like I know a lot of people talk about like work-life balance, but like we have a lot of work that just follows us home or follows us to all aspects of life. Like, do you think it's more socially acceptable because screens and technology are like affiliated with like our productive lives, whereas maybe like opioids are less associated with our productive lives?
I like the I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I can definitely see how that would be a big part of it. Is, yeah, like my dad basically can't go anywhere without his phone because like he needs to be able to get emails from work associates and stuff now. And like just constantly he has to basically be on call, and like for him he's actually leaving for China in a week to visit my mom, and it's gonna be a really big deal for him he's just going, no, I'm not taking any emails, no calls for like 3 weeks or something is what he's doing, and he like pretty much never gets to do that. So yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying with the work.
Yes, and back to Chloe.
Yeah, I mean, can't completely remember what I was originally going to say, but I think that we need to clarify the difference between like having a phone for like a productive purpose. Like my dad also has to have his phone on him at all times, but he also, like separate from the fact that he has to have it at all times, he also compulsively checks it at Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. Why is my dad on Snapchat? I don't know. But he compulsively checks it, and like those sites that are not related to productivity, and if we're talking about like the way that like opioid addiction or any other addiction isn't associated with productivity, which it might be interesting then to consider Adderall as an addiction, potentially productivity. I don't know. Anyways, just a random thought that I just had there. But a lot of what social media sites are trying to do is get you to not be productive. Facebook, no matter how many times I tell it not to notify me about different groups that I'm in or whatever, I will open and I have 4 or 5 notifications that I don't care about. But it wants me to open and say, hey, you have notifications. You should spend time on here because things are happening here that are not happening in your life over there. Same thing with LinkedIn. Every time I open LinkedIn, I have a notification, which makes no sense because I'm not really on LinkedIn all that much, you know? There shouldn't be that much activity. So I think that like part of the thing that separates like the phone as like a productive thing that can be good for your life and being addicted to it has to do with the tasks that are associated with what you're doing. So Christine, like checking your email compulsively could be like a minor addiction, right? To checking your email, right? But if you just have it and you know that you have it because you need to get emails all the time, then that's a different thing because it's like, oh, this is part of my professional life. It's part of something that like is separate. It's productive. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, Nizan.
No, I think there was some Suze before.
Oh, okay. I'm not that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh my gosh, I don't know your name.
Oh, I'm
If you
Grace.
don't mind. Okay, sorry. That's so nice. Okay. I'm also like not a fellow or anything,
totally
but
good. I just want to participate.
yeah. No, this is really interesting. I guess. Okay. One thing is that I personally sometimes, I don't know if anyone else in this room agrees with me because I feel like they don't, so that's what I'm gonna say is, I think that like the social media, sometimes I think that like the social media, it almost seems a little like paranoia to me. A lot of like this like, what is social media doing to us? It almost seems like a distraction from like other issues, like, okay, that's stupid because I guess you could always say that about any argument, it's a distraction from bigger issues, but I personally don't feel totally addicted to my phone. Maybe I'm like an outlier, but I also know I have an addictive personality, but I've managed to, but I'm addicted to, I'll check out like 30 books from the library, for instance, and read like one of them. I'll buy like, or I'll go to a thrift store and buy like thousands of clothes. So I feel like there's this way in which addictions that I don't need and don't wear. And then, yeah.
Then she gives them to me.
Yeah, true, exactly. So it doesn't mean that I'm any less addictive, but I've somehow found a way to sublimate or transmute, or I don't know the word, but I think that maybe there's an issue like okay, it's easy to say like who in this room is addicted to their phone, but then what if we ask like, I think there's an underlying reason for all of these addictions that like can be addressed. It's not just like, and it's not, I think there's been research shown that people that feel socially connected to their communities, that's one of the best ways to cure addiction. It's there's another thought process that says it's more neurochemical, but I also think it's like filling a void. And like the one thing we're not talking about is like who in this room has ever felt like extremely lonely or like unsatisfied or not fulfilled with like love or enough intellectual conversations. So I know that the times when I have had no desire to look at my phone are like the times when I'm like in class with like my professors and having an amazing conversation. Like, to me, that fills the. So I don't know if I'm even making sense, but I just think that there's maybe a simpler solution to this.
Or it's more of a symptom rather than a cause.
Yeah, I would say it's a bit more of a symptom, and I'm curious. I know technology is crazy new, but I have a strong feeling that people have been addicted to things for a very long time. That, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is totally different. So
I think it's just the next thing that we're using to
I don't know. Because technology has totally revolutionized everything. Maybe that's oversimplifying it. I don't think it's as big of a deal as we might make it out to be.
We had so many hands. So we're going Virginia, and then Nizam, and then Maya, and Melanie. And Celine.
Well, before Emma's cerebral diagnosis, I was thinking very simply, but that was really good.
No, please simplify anything.
No, I feel like something that we're kind of tiptoeing around, but haven't really hit on the head yet, is this idea of the limitless nature of the internet. It is limitless. I'm sort of a self-professed addict to Instagram, so I don't have it anymore. And I guess like my anecdote is I had a personal Instagram, and then when I got bored with that, I created a business Instagram. And then when I got bored with that, I created a meme page, which was pretty successful, if I do say so myself. But sort of this like, even when you get bored with the app's function or the phone's function, you can find a new way to incorporate it into your daily activities and your daily interests. And I think human beings have an obsession with like immensity. They have for years. And I think the real kicker, like even like you mentioned with the emails, like I think I have maybe 1,000 unread emails right now. Mm-hmm. No, it's more like 793 or something. Only 7. Which Grace understands because, poor thing, I didn't reply to her at all. Like the email thing, it's like it never stops, and that is both a fascinating and terrifying conundrum that we've gotten ourselves into. Yeah.
Use that? Do you have lots of emails?
I got my Gmail account when Gmail first opened, the personal account, and I think I have more than 10,000 unopened emails, and I'm paying Google for extra G Drive, so I'm not number's gonna go lower at any point, but I want to make a similar argument about the possibilities of technologies. It's just, I want to remind a historical perspective on this. When internet, like ICT technologies were first integrated into social life, like beginning with 1960s, 70s, and then with the internet in the 1990s. You know, the perspective was much different. It was, internet was seen as this thing that's creating possibilities for democracy, for revolutionizing the ways that we see development, that it's now different from the old historical ties, the old colonial ties all around the world, so the structural inequalities are going to be overridden by the new technologies, especially digital technologies. So it was this whole new utopic world that was ahead of us. And then things went down pretty quickly, and then now it turned into this Black Mirror kind of dystopia, right? How it became, like, we've seen the China example in the very first presentation today, and then the podcast that you showed us is the American version of it, differently. That state censorship, and then yours is more our addiction to these duopolistic or monopolistic technology companies. But I'm still wondering whether there would be other ways to make use of it, because when like with the Arab Spring, you might all remember that everybody was praising how social media was being used, you know, against autocratic regimes, against authoritarian regimes, and now all we talk about is how all these kinds of digital technologies are being manipulated by authoritarian regimes, and how there's no way for us to escape from it. But I still believe in the potential of these kinds of technologies, so that we can use them in other ways, maybe.
Hi. I just want to go back to something Emma said. So you were talking about, like, people have always been addicted to things, and this is like just another manifestation of that. On one hand, yeah, but on the other hand, I'm just going to be that really paranoid person that we talked about before.
Good.
Yeah, because I'm just scared of the government, is the thing.
Libertarian.
Yeah, I just think that the thing that's different between this and, like, going to thrift stores and buying a lot of clothes is that, like, now these big corporations just have so much information about you and about your preferences and about literally everything that you do on the internet, and they can just paint, like, a terrifyingly accurate picture of, like, who you are, what you want, like, who you interact with, like, your little secret, like, weird things that you look up on Wikipedia at 3 a.m. Slenderman. But, like, it's just very scary how well they're able to do that, and how privacy, because we have this particular addiction, is just completely non-existent. And it's just so easy, like, I don't know, this kind of gets back to the point that I made, like, much earlier about, like, the way in which laws function, like, how laws can apply to both things that you like and things that you don't, and how the existence of a certain kind, like, the existence of a law that allows you to do something isn't the same as actually doing that thing. It's like, the government has the capability to do so much, and these corporations have the capability to do so much with the information that we voluntarily give them. Right now, I mean, I don't think they're doing things that are that insidious most of the time, not all of the time, but I think that the possibility for that is just absolutely terrifying, which is why I still don't have Instagram. But I have Facebook, and I think all the time about what kinds of things I'm posting on Facebook, and what kinds of things I'm commenting on, whether or not I like or follow a page, because it's just so scary to me. I'll be having a conversation with somebody about something random, and then I'll get an ad for it, and I'm just like...
And that's a perfect segue, actually, because there are many other question slides, and we spent a good amount of time on this one. I love all of the discussion, but, you know, more to come. So another recent headline that I was reading about was in a publication called The Business of Fashion. So it's, like, you know, a little bit less newsy or academic, but it really looks at, like, luxury goods and economic models and, like, business and luxury goods. And this article in particular really struck out to me. It was like the feature of the month of March feature. That's what I was trying to say. That summarized, like, as the middle class has grown, specifically from like the 20th century onwards, like a lot of people became wealthier, and with the advent of wealth were like status symbols, and whether that was like a luxury car or a luxury clothing item, or even now like luxury experiences like private school or a fancy vacation to Sun Valley, or what have you, like any sort of luxury good. They were thinking towards the future of like experiences and how we take that further, and this author said that the future of luxury goods is freedom, and the freedom to disconnect, and that this is an inherently a position that is meant for wealthy consumers, and a position that can only be sort of achieved with a certain level of status and wealth, and that this that having freedom will be the ultimate signifier of wealth. And I really got to thinking, like, what are some of the implications of freedom being seen as a luxury good? And if we looked back at our conversation that we've been having about technology and these sort of Silicon Valley, like private school kids going screen free, and having this maybe more digital freedom, like what does it mean to see freedom as a luxury good, and whether this is a new phenomenon? This really got me thinking, especially in regards to Virginia's presentation on Moderato Fonte, and how these women in society were maybe seen as having less status, even though they were elite women, but they also had a little bit less freedom. Like they were stuck in these marriages that they pretty much had no choice. It was church or marriage. And so I wanted to discuss this, and I'll move to the next question so we can talk about both, is should we be free from technology, which is sort of what the podcast was talking about, or as maybe Nazan was talking about a little bit more, like this in Virginia, this infinite scroll, like the limitlessness of possibilities, like is that a place of potential? Is that a source of inspiration and the democratization of society because of this limitlessness of the internet and digital technology? So that's our next discussion question. Go!
So I think that this is a cycle that we have, like, as humanity, where we get technology, and when it first starts, the entry cost to using it is so high that it's pretty much only a luxury good. And I feel like we've always kind of had freedom be a luxury good. I mean, you go way back, indentured servitude wasn't something that rich people had to deal with. It was, you literally lost your freedom in exchange for money, because you couldn't afford to do something otherwise. There's no difference. But I think that, like, there's something called graphite, which is Google Drive and Google Suites is considered one of the biggest academic intrusions to privacy, because so many people do so many things through it nowadays rather than any alternative way. But graphite is a blockchain-based, completely encrypted, free version of Google Drive that doesn't store anything and can't because of the way that it's designed. It was made by a group of people who are human rights experts, and they made it to try and help, one, large companies with secrets that they don't want getting out, and don't want to trust Google to have them, but then started applying it for human rights issues. And so what I think it is we're making that cycle again. When we started with, paper and pen, first only rich people could afford them, but eventually it became the thing that, people wrote like religious revivals on, and like started civil rights movements by spreading around literature and that kind of thing. Yeah, the printing press, it brought a ton of freedom with it. So I think that this is just the beginning of the next cycle, but now it's tech.
Slate?
I think I saw this, like, I see the difference between the luxury for, like, my father and my mother when it comes to technology. So my mom, like, has her phone and she has to answer emails because or else, like, it will affect her ability to do her job, and there are certain expectations. But my dad has an old Nokia where he has to tap 3 times on the C just to get the C in capital. And like his job doesn't have his cell phone number, and he has a home number, and when we ask him about it, it's like, oh, like that if they want to call, they know that they might have my kid first, and like that they avoid calling me. And I think that that comes with the luxury of being comfortable enough in your statute at your job to be able to do that, because I don't think nowadays, like when you're an incoming analyst, if you tell your job, I'm going to give you my parents' number because I don't want you calling me out of hours, yeah, I don't think you're going to last very long at that job in performance reviews. And so I think like my parents have very different positions, and I can see like one is way more secure in a way and doesn't need technology. He doesn't need to answer his emails outside of work because he has a sort of luxury out of it, while my mother does not have that same luxury.
Mandy, was that a hand?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I was thinking like I would tend to think that technology would give me more freedom just because I didn't have a lot of access to it when I was a kid, like to the outside world, and I was thinking a lot about how there's like a big tech companies like sticking up privacy side to technology, but there's also like connection between people, especially in our generation, because one major way I bond with my friends is I send them memes and they're like, ha ha ha, that's funny, that's relatable. And especially after I discovered, I don't know if anyone knows about it, but there's a Facebook group called Subtle Aging Traits.
Oh, yeah.
That it's just literally like all the Asians, like whether you're like Asian American or just Asian, like they share like their Asian life and like their Asian family. For example, they'll be like, oh, you go home for Spring Festival to visit your relatives, and they're like, oh, you've grown fat, like things like that. That I thought that, oh, my family's weird because these things, like when I grew up, I couldn't like understand. It's like happening in so many other households, and that made me feel better, and I felt really connected to that group of people just because I felt like I have a lot in common with them, like culturally. And I feel like in that way, I really appreciate like having that because because it really like it's almost like a way of like healing for people. It's like one step of healing from like a lot of like the toxic Asian household like traits, because like the first step is to know that, oh, you're not going through everything alone. So I think that for me, like the personal connection part of technology is like, yeah.
And I mean, you're not alone. Subtle Asian Traits is like the fastest growing Facebook group.
Yeah.
I think it's like all over the news. Like news sources have been reporting on it. Like millions of members like within their first year, like because of that sort of relatability factor. So I don't think that you're isolated in that experience. Virginia,
Sort of to agree with Mandy's point, I think technology has done so much. I mean, on the one hand, like I can go into my phone and find out how many flights of stairs I've traveled up. That's terrifying. But on the other, like you mentioned, like the Arab Spring. Like I think of like Bassem Youssef. Like he was this Egyptian comedian. Like through his like show, like he like inspirational figures like can inspire the like. Can you imagine like Martin Luther King, but like on social media, like the Black Lives Matter movement is entirely like it's birthed from. That's an ugly phrasing. It originates from social media and technology, and it sort of harkens back to the conversation we had earlier in the semester or last semester about giving up freedom in order for safety, and it's rather than safety, it's almost like giving up freedom for revolution or for progress.
One very specific, but I think like really important issue that we haven't talked about. I guess to kind of contradict my other, or not contradict, but temper, I guess, my other point about the internet, being just another one of our, cyclical obsessions or addictions, but actually something really harmful is, and related to freedom in a really literal sense, maybe not just the people that are on the screens, but the people that are implicated or exploited. I think that like pornography and the whole porn industry and going on, like there's multiple variations. Trafficking, I think that there is and I'm not even talking about whether, watching pornography leads to sexual violence or stuff. I don't even think I believe that. But just the fact that somebody can sell their body, or probably somebody can sell someone else's body and get money based on how many clicks they get for really, really, really horribly violent things, non-consensual sexual acts, and that it can be happening on the internet, it's just like mind-blowing to me that some of the stuff that's on the internet we are allowed to watch, and that it's not considered criminal activity to watch some of the things that like are on the internet now. And it doesn't even have to be pornography, violence, anything. So I don't know. I think that there's a lot of exploitation that by powerless. I think powerful people, because of the internet, are able to exploit. This is like super obvious, but I just think it's a big issue that yeah.
Also going back to the exploitation of like internet, going back to again the luxury is that like if you have more money, you have the power to exploit how your data is being managed. So you have the option of like hiring private contractors to be able to erase all your data or everything that's about you online. And I know a lot of people who do that, who like erase news articles that have been made about them or a lot of their data. And like obviously you can go find it in the deep web, but it's not in like the normal search engines. And so I think like that's also a very interesting step to say that like at our school, for example, they not promoted, but they were okay with some of our students using Thor because they knew that parents were more sensitive and there were a lot of like ambassadors' children's. And so they were like more privy to be like, okay, you can install Thor if you have a special permission.
Yeah.
So this second slide for me kind of illustrates what I thought of when I think of digital freedom or freedom from technology or freedom with technology. The first discussion set a perspective for me, like there are a lot of different ways to think about digital freedom. But this one in particular, when I thought about it, I think, do we have the freedom from technology to still make global change? Can we still set movements and make movements and move people either locally, nationally, or even globally without technology? And I think at this point the answer is no, that we need technology because the world is a technological one. And most of the things that we set out to do nowadays, if we've become increasingly global and people want to be global, and that will have to be contingent on how we use technology. And like people will use technology for exploitation, but we will also use technology to find those individuals and to hopefully punish those individuals. It's just kind of become the medium with how we interact with each other. And as that evolves, we'll find other mediums, evolving technology. Technology will always be the medium through which we communicate with each other. It just depends on what does technology look like today.
I really like that. Might fast forward a couple of slides really fast so we can finish up here. That was just a really good segue. So the next thing that I had been thinking about was privacy scandals. And like Celine was just talking about, like we have a lot of data out there. And if you guys don't know me, I'm an economics major. I'm like really passionate about economics. And something that I had been thinking about were like the economics of privacy. Like what are we demanding and what are we supplying? Like if we're supplying our data, like what do people want to do with it? And I think the two things that really struck out to me reading a ton of articles and just really sitting with this is that we have like data like in our preferences, and ultimately people want to like know more about us, like know what to advertise to us and know like sort of predict our behavior, but then also they want our attention, like our really fast attention spans, and they want us to spend a lot of time on YouTube and get those AdSense going. And how that sort of plays into our first conversation, our seminar today about the intersection of government and politics with these discussions of freedom and privacy. And one of the really big pieces of legislation, not in the US, but in Europe, has been GDPR, which we can talk about, but was a very broad and very sort of comprehensive program that was implemented. I'll put that in air quotes because it was really, a long process for them, and how those are all relevant discussions into how we think about our privacy. And then also how, in some ways, even if we don't necessarily have our government controlling us, that a lot of these companies, like there are not very many of them, it's not very decentralized. The blue is an American company and the red is a Chinese company, if you were wondering what these mean. And this is as of 2018 revenue, not, revenue, not earnings. And so our last question that we'll summarize in the last 5 questions or the last 5 minutes of discussion are, what does digital freedom look like from a political standpoint, specifically as it relates to privacy and how we think about our own privacy and our own data being out there? and whether we are entitled to this sort of privacy. And yeah, love to hear what you guys think. Starting with Zach.
I would say we definitely are. Like, first thing that sort of came to mind for me with this was that like we have laws that police can't just barge into your house even if they have reasonable suspicion, like they have to get a warrant and stuff. Like there are certain exceptions, but like, I don't know, should companies have to basically get a warrant or something to
They currently do.
get your data?
Yeah. So currently, like
I
if
thought they just collected data in there. Or is it
So-
not really?
Facebook has that data, but if the police say, hey, we're concerned about
Oh,
what's
no, I'm
happening
just
on
talking
the
about the
internet.
company themselves.
So the company should have to get a
collecting the
warrant to you, like that kind of.
So, like, when you
I'm not
opt in-
even saying companies should have to get a warrant to collect data. I'm more just comparing the two and saying like, why are companies just allowed to collect data when even the police need special permission to basically invade your life? And
Isn't that what like terms and conditions are technically?
yeah, but but those are bullshit.
It does feel like we're in danger of gradually, maybe by incremental steps, losing our privacy. We used to have Alexa in our house, and then we unplugged Alexa. I think partly because we realized that sometimes we accidentally said something that she thought we had forgotten that there was this electronic thing in our house that was hearing everything that we've said. And there have been times when things that people have said in the privacy of their own houses have come back to bite them when they get out. And even though they didn't make it, I forget the owner of a big athletic organization who made a racist comment in his own house, ended up having to sell his business because of that. Yeah, maybe, I mean, I'm not trying to defend going around saying racist things, but you do have sort of an expectation that in private situations, you should be able to say anything and have like some zone where you're not publicly accountable. I read recently, I think it was last weekend in the New York Times, an article about artificial intelligence and how they have new technologies that can analyze your brain and see if you're, it's like sort of like lie detector machines, only much more accurate because they can locate the part of your brain that will indicate if you're telling the truth or not. So perhaps in legal proceedings in the future, rather than you having a zone where you can lie, because that's a private action. I'm not defending lying, but don't we have a right to do it? I mean, don't we have some part of our human being that just isn't going to need to be open for everyone to see? So apparently, there may be technologies to analyze your brainwaves that can tell what your intention was when you committed a certain act, or whether you're telling the truth at a certain time. Or we have these little machines in our houses that potentially can listen to what we say, and who knows where that information is going. I mean, beyond the fact that you open an ad on Amazon and the next thing you know you're seeing that same blouse 1,000 times because of course you didn't buy it, but it's still for sale and we know you like it. So it just feels like we're gradually but inexorably opening our whole souls out to the world, and it does feel dystopian. I do feel worried about that loss of privacy.
Maya? I mean, I agree with the loss of privacy, definitely. And like the whole right to be forgotten thing. Does anyone know about like the right to be forgotten in Europe? No. Where it's like if you do something stupid at like many years ago and it ends up on the internet, you have like a right to scrub it off the internet and to be like, this does not represent me as a person anymore. And you have to like petition someone and then they'll just like remove it. So if it's a lot of defamation and stuff like that can just get scrubbed off the internet. I think that's really interesting. It's just like, I don't want to be accountable for stupid things I said in middle school and like my middle school Tumblr account. Like that's not something that I feel like is representative of me anymore. Even if I just don't want people to be able to find that and hold me accountable. And I think that now that so much of our life is lived online, like people there's very little chance for people to truly demonstrate that they've changed. There's very little chance for people to actually change, and people are just pigeonholed into the same kind of person that they've always been online. Especially because a lot of times people don't even get the opportunity to defend themselves, and you'll just find a tweet that someone had from like 2011 and be like, oh, this is like sexist, this person is bad, and then all of a sudden they're getting fired from Disney, and it's like, we don't know if that's how that person really feels anymore, and I just think it's decreased a lot of like the sense of humanity that we have for other people. And then the other thing I was going to say kind of about this is that the whole targeted advertising thing is very scary, but I think it's also scary just because it limits our options so much. Like an example of this I can think of is Spotify, like Discover Weekly playlists. So I'm like a huge music person, and I'll listen to my Discover Weekly playlist. I'm like, this is all music that Spotify thinks I'll like, and usually like there's 1 or maybe 2 out of 30 songs that I actually do like. And like I'm limiting myself in terms of like the genres that I listen to because it's not allowing me to branch out. It's just like constraining what kinds of things I listen to, and it's just controlling what kind of things I even have access to rather than like letting me go look wherever. And in terms of advertising, it's like we find out what kinds of things we want to consume because of advertising. The fact that we're targeted by things that we already like just means that we're pretty limited in what we can go out and discover, and I think it limits self-expression kind of a lot. Okay.
So one of the jobs that I have is I actually work as a digital media fellow for a public policy think tank in Boston, which in short means I make those ads for political reasons. I had to get approved by Facebook and verify my location through the mail because after the whole Russia thing, they were worried about who has the capacity to send those ads. And one thing that has supremely bothered me is before I started working on this campaign, we did a lot of stuff regarding Common Core when Common Core was first coming out. So a lot of the people that follow our page are older. They tend to be mothers. They tend to be parents. They're a very particular audience. And that means that the algorithm I can see, because I've done statistical analyses of the actual like numbers that we get on what type of content that we do, the algorithm sorts out based off of what you already like politically, what we end up posting. If I end up posting something that's off-brand for that particular parenting group, then the numbers for those people don't get it. And it's not like small. You can go and see, we'll get 100 likes on something about transportation and 1,000 likes on something about Common Core. And that just really concerns me as someone who is politically active, because that means that for the majority of people who get a lot of information via either cable news television, which sometimes hosts like op-eds on Facebook and things they found on Twitter, and social media. So are we just going in circles?
Why are we going in circles? We're actually out of time, but
sorry.
It's all good. No, that's a great way to end. I'll just finish up here and then give it back to you. Our last slide, so this is sort of the overarching question that like sort of motivated me was, is digital freedom possible, which is what we started with. And even if it is it possible for everyone, which is sort of the luxury aspect. And even if digital freedom means that we can disconnect from our screens, does that mean that we don't have our data out there? Does that mean that we have the privacy of our own homes, or that space has been intruded upon? I don't have the answers, but I had a really great time with this discussion. Thank you all so much for participating. And now for closing remarks from Kayla.
I'm just going to do this up here because we're already in a semicircle, which is super convenient. I'm Kayla Webb. I'm the student director of the Freedom Project. And first of all, I'd like to give a round of applause for Grace for And I just wanted to close today with reflecting on how far we've come as a project. Before I was student director of the Freedom Project, I was actually a fellow my freshman year for the 2016-2017 academic year. I spent months working on a project with 2 other people on geopolitics in China, specifically before and after Trump, because it was 2016. And mine was on environmental policy. And back then, the Freedom Project did our presentations as part of the Rowman Conference for Wellesley. And as a excited freshman on campus who hadn't been to Roman before. I showed up thinking, okay, we're gonna have half of our time be the presentation and the other half is going to be, you know, this vigorous question and answering session, this debate. And 2 people showed up to a panel that had 3 people presenting on it, which meant our question and answering didn't really have any conversation. There wasn't any critical feedback. And I felt like, yeah, I learned a lot in that research process, but I was missing that almost, the thing that a lot of professors get, you know, peer review. I didn't get any of that as an undergraduate student, and I felt like I really missed it. So the next year when I asked, hey, what can I do to help? And they said, you should work as a student director. I went and I said, you know, what are we going to do for the research this year? And my student co-director, Margaret Fonsapia, said, okay, let's do a conference. We had 24 fellows last year, so it was a 2-day conference, and it was the first one we did. We didn't open it to the public. The only people that were allowed to come were the fellows, and each of them was to bring 1 friend. And that was great, because the fellows did that peer review, and the fellows ended up having that conversation. And this year we decided, okay, let's make it just a little bit bigger and let people bring as many people as I want. Let's open it to the public. Let's advertise it online. And this is what we've got. And I just wanted to say that we've been training the fellows for this event all year. You guys might not have noticed it, but that's what your seminars were. It's the same format. We brought someone to present their expertise for half of the time, and then you spent the other half questioning it. We brought mentors in who spent time showing you how to do research if you didn't know how to do it, and gave you leads if you already were on the way. And I just hope that all of you guys leave today, take a bit of the Freedom Project process with you. That you find a mentor to guide your questions no matter how much of an expert you already are on the topic. That you think critically on what you're presented with, and use your freedom to do so to promote the freedom of others. I can't thank you enough for your attendance today, because your support of the Freedom Project translates to support of a fully rounded, critically thinking undergraduate education. Thanks.
Yes. And that is the end of our conference. Thank you all so much for coming. Grab a final sandwich if you need one on your way out. And thank you all so much for coming.